I'm proud to be a part of Hammond. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And I have another request over here. Yes, I'm coming to you. Okay.
Hi.
Just hold it and speak.
Thank you. All right.
Natural.
Okay. My name is, hi. My name, can you hear me? I'm Olympia Barriolas. A very old family in Hammond. I was born here in 1914. Very few women will give their age, but I was just 85 this last May. And we were a very big family. My uncle and dad came from Greece, and we were the very first Greek settlers in Hammond, the first and only Greeks at that time. And they built the main restaurant on Hammond and State and Hammond. And they bought the home right behind the Indiana, which was a beautiful big brick home. And there were 7 boys downstairs and 7 girls. My dad had 7 girls, and my uncle had 7 boys. We have 14 people living in that house. After a while, as we were growing, Dad bought another house on the other side of Plummer Street. Now, Plummer Street was a lovely street in those days. Not today. They named it Willow Court now. But we bought a home on the other side of Holman Avenue and grew up there until we built a home in the south side of Hammond. But after the Maine, about 1928, they built the Indiana Hotel, my dad and uncle. And that was torn down in 1992. My girlfriend, Carol Jurgens, went and got one of the bricks when they tore the building down and gave it to me to remind me of the Indiana Hotel building. And I may give it to the Hammond Historical if they want it. And I remember Hammond when it grew, and I remember when it blew away, when there was nothing in Hammond. I was a ghost town, but at one time you couldn't even cross the street. It was so busy. I saw all the stores. I saw Parthenon Theater, Paramount, all those stores on Hirsch store and remember Long store and name them. You know who I'm talking about. There are many, many stores. And I had wonderful childhood. And of all the boys now, there's only one boy living, George Barriolas. He was a coach at Hammond Tech. And of the girls, there are 5 of us living. There's still 5 living of the 7. And all I can say is that the same thing you people have talked about Hammond, I have gone through all of that, and I had a wonderful childhood. That's about all I can say.
Okay, well,
all
thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, okay, geez. Because I don't have to say anything. Just pass the mic.
Oh. I'm Lois Wilson Sherby, and one thing I wanted to mention that hasn't been mentioned was going to Hammond High School was the wonderful music that we had at Hammond High School. I played the slide trombone in the orchestra, and I can remember going to contests in Evansville, Kansas City, and various places and coming home with honors. I remember playing in the girls' band, and we had a boys' band at that time that played for all the shows. But I think our musical instruction in Hammond at that time was very outstanding. And also the vocal. And I can remember singing with the choral groups and going into Hammond and performing. One day we performed in and about Chicago Chorus, which was down at the Stevens Hotel or something. Well, that was a big thing to go to Chicago and sing with that. So I think we had a wonderful background of cultural instruction in our own Hammond High School and in our schools in Hammond. And our class of 1935 has continued to have reunions. We had our 25th, our 50th, our 60th, and since then we've continued every year. And this year we celebrated our 64th reunion, so we're very proud of that. Thank you. You want to say something?
Oh, okay.
I'm Ken Stromberger. I'm the new kid on the block. I was born in 1918. Anyhow, do any of you remember the Deluxe Theater It was on the east side of Hammond, right next door to Woolworths. Woolworths, thank you. Back about 1927 or 28, in the early days of radio, there was a vaudeville act by the name of Sam and Henry, who later became, their real names were Corell and Gosden. They later became Amos and Andy and became quite famous. But one of their, at that time, when they appeared at the Deluxe, they were on one of the Chicago stations routinely. And this was before the networks were really developed as far as that goes. Someone mentioned the Orpheum Theater. The Orpheum in the 20s and 30s had a resident theatrical group who put on a different stage play every Sunday evening, and this went on, perhaps for 10 or 15 years, something like that. And it used to be, as far as myself and my family were concerned, it was a highlight of the social week to go to the Orpheum on Sunday evening. Earlier, we mentioned the Goldblatt Brothers building. Actually, that building was built by their predecessor company and was called the Lion Store in those days, and was owned by Kaufman and Wolf. In 1928, I think it was, they tore down their original building and put up the building which had to be finally dynamited to destroy because it was of such inferior structure, apparently. And I think that's all that I had.
Okay. All right.
I think this is fun. Right down the street, of course, we all know where Minus's was. And across the street from Minus's was is it Hoosier Bank? Was Hoosier Bank? Yeah. And upstairs of the Hoosier Bank was Nolan's grandfather, Dr. Hipsher. And he loved Nolan so much, he would bring him to his office and change his diapers, and Nolan's diapers would be hanging out above the Hoosier Bank out the window. And I also.
Did you really want to share that?
Yeah, I think it.
I guess he's used to you embarrassing him like that.
Yeah, it's cute. It's not embarrassing. And my mom and dad, I don't know how many of you know them, were Peter McMines and my mother, Joe McMines, and she'll be 93 and still going strong. She does more than I do and thinks quicker. But they've retired and moved away a few years ago.
Okay, and we'll go to Larry here.
I'm Larry Kniezer. I'm a transplant because I grew up in Calumet City and moved to Hammond in 1955, mainly because I married a woman from Hammond, or a girl at the time. But my memories go back because Calumet City had no downtown. It was all Hammond, and so it was a short walk for us. We'd be right across the line. But I remember as a kid, Goldblatt's had Toyland in the basement, and they had the biggest display of Lionel trains that you would ever see in your life. And I used to go down there and drool and watch the trains go by and the gates come down and the little man come out and swing his lantern, and I just died to have one of these trains. Well, of course, I picked up the literature with the price sheet and the whole works, and I remember bringing it home and going through, and well, times were tough. It was during the Depression, so I tried to pick out the cheapest one I could find. I remember it was $19. And I said, "Dear Dad, look at this one. It's only $19. Little did I realize it was probably the whole Christmas budget. But I ended up with a wind-up train. And I remember I was disappointed, but my dad then made a small station, and he put real glass windows in it and had a battery-operated light on the inside of it. So in those days, you had to do what you could do, and you had to work with what you had to work with, which wasn't very much then. We made everything that we could amuse ourselves with on an old jigsaw in the basement. So that's where part of my Christmas present came from. But I also remember the shoreline buses come in from the harbor, And of course, they transferred, most of the transfer points were right at Sibley and Homan, or a lot of them were. And right behind Walgreens store was Solon's Tavern. And that was the big source of his business, because you get off the bus from East Chicago, wait for the one to go to South Hammond or the one to go to Calumet City, you stop into Solon's for a couple quick ones. So, but then he got fancy, and he made it into a nightclub with nice fake leather on the bar and all. And that killed his business, because the guys didn't want to come in there with their dirty overalls and old greasy work shoes and mess up his nice bar. So some things you can do to improve, and other things it doesn't improve. And you learn your lessons as you go along. I do know Hammond was a thriving downtown. It's not thriving any longer as a retail center. Retail centers are now spread around over the landscape, but downtown is still is a vibrant place. Can be vibrant from the fact that there are federal buildings here, and people say, well, you know, they got the hospital and they don't pay taxes, but they sure employ a lot of people. We still have, I'll put in our plug for Harrison Park. We have Harrison Park is still there. I belong to the Harrison Park Neighborhood Association, and we work to make improvements in the park. We have a little mini museum there. You're all welcome to come in and take a look. It's open today. And that ends my commercial.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think there's some people over there that haven't spoken yet. Boy, I can talk. Bob, do you want to say anything? Yeah. Okay.
I'm Bob Kendall. I've been here around 67 years. Came here when I was 12 years old and stayed here. I used to work in this area here. Used to be A&P. I don't know how many of you remember it. Supermarket, second supermarket in the Chicago area. And I spent 2.5 years here, and it was a wonderful tour of duty. And I remember on Thursday nights going downtown Hammond, and Hirsch, Joe Hirsch, his dad, and Kaplan Shoe Store and that, and many fond memories of Hammond. I enjoyed every minute of it.